I had I had just put my daughter to bed, right? And it was a day, it was a long day at work. Had dinner, put my daughter to bed like I always do, talk to her a little bit. And one thing I love to do is I love to watch sports and do some final touch-ups on my day. And so this day, I did that. I put her to bed. I was putting some final touch-ups on my day. And across the bottom of the screen said the NBA game was canceled because of a virus. And so, not really a news watcher, I closed my laptop and I said, "This is serious." And I remember just going and getting in the car, not saying much. And when I got to the grocery store, it was like a Saturday morning when you go to the grocery store, it was super packed and people weren't saying that there was a somber mood in the grocery store and people are just loading up carts. And I know I put as much as I could in 2 carts, probably spent around $700 that day because I didn't know what was going to happen next. For me, as soon as I got those groceries, I got back to the house and I said, "What's really going on?" And I remember turning on CNBC and they had all the Dow futures down, the S&P futures are down. And at that point, I'd already been doing financial advising for over 10 years, 12 years around that time. And I panicked. I moved some investments around. I didn't know what was going on. That day, even with all my experience, I remember not being sure of what was going to happen next with my money. And so that leads me to the conversation we're going to have today. When world events happen and we panic, what does it mean? And that day, I admit I did panic. Now we did do some different things differently, but the things that we're going to talk about tonight are what to do when world events happen and how we manage it. Because at the end of the day, if we don't have a strategy, then we end up losing and not being able to win and create legacy the way we want to for our family. So today we're going to talk about the Iran war, how that relates to even the coronavirus and other world events, and what people that are now TSP millionaires and others have done to be able to weather those storms in a strategic way. Because at the end of the day, no matter what's going on, we must always have a foundational strategy, a tax and inflation strategy, and a risk management strategy. So today we're going to take a look back so we can move forward and be all right. So one of the questions that I've been asked a lot about from text, I got a bunch of texts this weekend, a bunch of calls on for Monday was, Mr. Smith, now that there's a conflict going on, should I move all my money to the G fund? Which is a common thing that people do in times of conflict. And so what I want to do, and it's a great question to ask. And so what I want to do is I want to take a look back at the last 30 years and look at what the market has done in those times. When we look back at the last 30 years when it's come to conflicts, we look at the Gulf War, we look at 9/11, we look at the Iraq War, and even the Russia and Ukraine. Those 3 times, in those 4 conflicts, the market has dropped at the initial situation 13, 11, 5, and 5%, right? Double-digit drops in one, 5% or more in the others. But over time, those markets have bounced back. Even in the coronavirus, the market had dropped over 20%, but then over the next 2 years, it went up 75%. And so what this says is, if you're patient, the market will drop back. The biggest mistake that people make is the fear hits, you move everything to the G fund. And I always talk about this. You lock your money into the basement. And so you lock your money in the basement. And then when that market bounces back, you're locked in that basement and it takes you even longer to get out because you panic. And then all of a sudden now it takes you longer to get out. So I want to give you an example of that. So here's a person, 2 people, 230,000. Both of them have money in the C fund. And this is an example of during the coronavirus era in 2020, right? So you have 2 people, 1 person, 230, both people 230,000, both had their money in the C fund. Panic hit, market started to drop. One moved their money to the G fund, another person moved their money, let's let their money ride. And I've seen this happen over and over and over again. And so in that example, market drops, now this person's down to 162. The other person also went down to 162. But then when the market recovered, The person that was still in the G fund is still in that 162 range, right? In the 160 range, because the G fund is just not moving as fast as the C fund when it bounced back. So now the C fund by year end was plus 18%. Now they're at 272 a year later, because again, you never really know when to get in and out the market. And a lot of folks, and this happened a lot for all of y'all that were working in 2020 in 2008. I've had many calls where people moved their money in 2008 after the market lost 30% and they never went back. And those folks, retired a whole lot less. So in this example, if you look at the last 5 years, if you would have done that in the 2020 example, you'll be down with that person at the end of a 5 year stretch after moving their money from the G fund, from the C fund to the G fund and never moving it back out because they said, I'm done taking risk. Would have ended up at 186 over the last 5 years, whereas the other person would have been at 452. That's a significant jump. That's a $200,000, $266,000 gap, all because one person stayed the course, whereas another person had fear and stayed in the G fund and didn't move again. And we see that a lot. Now, you can go anywhere between that, and that's what the next slide talks about. When it comes to financial planning, the reason why you want to stay the course and have a strategy, right? I'm not saying just stay in the C fund blindly. I'm just saying make sure you have a strategy. And this is why we talk about the financial house and we talk about those three layers to your retirement plan. And especially for you all. And when I talk about the financial house, I'm really talking to folks that are retiring in the next 2 years or are already retired. If you have longer to work, you should just stay the course of allowing your money to stay CSI, let it ride. History has proven that, and just let it ride. And these things that happen in the market, you just don't pay them any attention. But if you're somebody that has 2 years or less for as far as retirement go or already retired, you really can't operate that same way because these dips really impact you. And so I'm really speaking to you. And when it comes to time in the market, because oftentimes you hear people say, well, I'm just going to move into the G fund now, or I'm going to move into this, I'm going to move less. I'm going to jump in and out of the market. The issue is timing the market is extremely tough. And so one of the things that we always talk about as advisors is a known fact is certain days every year where the market has its highest jump. And if you miss those days, then you miss significant growth. And so for this example is over the last 10 years. If you missed the 10 best days in the market, just the 10 best days, and the best days in the market typically happen 2 weeks after the initial drop, right? If a drop happens 2 week within that 2 week period, we don't know which day it will be. Typically, you have your highest spike days. And so if a person just missed the 10 best days versus a person that stayed fully invested, you're looking at over the last 20. If you just missed those 10 days, the return average on the S&P 500 is 5.3%. 5.3% is if you just take out the 10 best S&P 500 days, because again, you don't know when they're going to be. Just those 10 over a 10-year period, you're at a 5.3%. And this is an example of somebody with 230,000 in the TSP. At the end of 10 years, you're at 381,000. If you just missed those top 10. Now, if you stay fully invested and ride it all the way out, didn't make any shifts, it's a 12.6% return on the S&P 500 index. That's a $754,000 balance. This is extremely important for folks to say, I want to get in and out of the market and try to time it perfectly. What you want to do is you want to make sure you have a strategy. If you have that strategy, you're able to ride it out so that when those bounce back spike days happen, you're able to have it. And so this is why in Fed Legacy, we talk so much about the financial house because, like I mentioned, we've been doing this now 18 years. We have a ton of experience on our staff, and we're always learning, always learning. And the thing that we want to emphasize to you, if you don't have a strategy, make sure you get one. We call it in Fed Legacy, we call our strategy your financial house. And the benefit of the financial house is when moments like this happen, we're not reacting. Like, I got a few calls this time. Every year is less and less because we're fortifying these financial houses for our clients, but we get referrals, we get all these type of things because when markets drop, people panic. But the thing we instill in our clients is like, look, let's build a foundation. And what that is that's money that's protected, and we want to make sure we protect things for like your income, because the last thing you want to do is a financial disaster happening, and the money that you're pulling for income is the money that is in the market. So, for example, the market drops 10% in a day. Every month, you're pulling income from that account. That's really, really scary. That's really, really scary. And so you want to make sure the money that you're receiving income from is in a protected status, right? So that's one of the first things we make sure we set up when we're meeting with clients. We make sure we put that money in a protected status. Now, on top of that, you want to make sure that you have money that is paying you income, but it's also outpacing inflation, because if you see, that's on the news all the time. And then you also want to make sure you have a tax strategy. You want to make sure you're taking on the proper amount of risk. All those things we talk about consistently. But for example, I was talking to someone today and they were just saying, hey, well, this is an opportunity. It was my first call this morning. And because of our calls, they understand the power of the C fund over the long term. And they were like, well, I do have some money that's still sitting in the G fund. They had like a small percentage. There's like, well, this is a good time probably to buy some of this, some C fund, because the market is dipped. I can buy those shares at the dip. And that's exactly what we had her do, right? And so you want to make sure you have a strategy, because when you have a strategy, moments like this, moments of panic or opportunities, he keeps a certain amount of money, cash, for when the markets panic, right? And so keeping, and what that means is, and that could be, in your case, it could be money in the G fund, right? That you're strategically using to buy C fund. And we don't have to get too deep in the weeds on that, but it's just opportunities like this are not where you panic and move money to the G fund, right? You want to make sure you have a strategy that over the next 5 to 10 years, you can ride that strategy out, so that no matter what happens in the market, you have a win already. And one of the things that most people panic on is because the money that they're taking income from, the money that they are expecting for long-term care, is tied up in something that is fluctuating, and that's not what you want to do. So what I want to get back to is this: the things you want to do this week. You can watch the news and all that type of stuff, but don't move your TSP based on it. Move your TSP based on a strategy. Make sure you once you have a solid strategy, you don't have to waver from it. You can make small tweaks, but no big panics. Okay, so I want you to check, make sure you have some level of a strategy. We call it the financial house here at Fed Legacy, but if you're managing your own money, make sure you have some money set aside for long-term care and income planning. Make sure you have that percentage of money set aside somewhere, and you understand that. Also, make sure you have a Roth conversion strategy set up. It's super important, especially with the Secure Act. Make sure you so this week look at those things, because again, one other factor is, now that there's war, there's a lot more spending, so there could be a lot. The chances of taxes being higher in the future are very high now, because we're spending a lot of money on a war. And so now, chance of tax could be higher. So you want to make sure you have a tax strategy, so you get your taxes out the way. So as your money grows, you're not forced to pay those taxes in the future. And so making sure, so make sure you have that in place this week. Another thing you want to make sure you have in place is an inflation plan, right? So those are the three things. So make sure you have that inflation plan set up, your tax plan set up, your income plan set up this week. Don't make any panics in the market, right? If you're a client of ours, just check in with us on your financial house. We'll make sure. And then another thing is just to stress test your plan. We have what's called the retirement analyzer software, where we take all your numbers, we put them in there. It gives us a full view of your retirement plan and lets you know if it works or not. If you have something like that, or if you have an advisor, make sure you reach out to your advisor. If you want to work with us, you can. But do those things this week, so that you can understand where you stand. Because if not, you can set yourself back unnecessarily. And I could tell you, when we've been doing this for a long time, the people that are TSP millionaires at this stage, that are in their 60s, have millions in their TSP. The majority of them, during the 2008 down the 2008 crisis, financial crisis, they were working in the government during that time. Yeah, 2008 crisis. During that time period, they stayed the course, or they moved the money they had in the G fund into the CS&I funds and allowed that money to bounce back, and they never touched it again. The majority of the people that today that we work with that are TSP millionaires stayed the course during that time. And now they reap the benefit because after that time period, the TSP continued to go up the next three years in a row over 20%. And then when Obama came in office, the TSP, the C fund did double digit returns. I believe 7 out of the 8 years he was president. And so you want to make sure you stay the course because if you stay the course, you'll create a lot of generational wealth for you and your family. And moments like this are when people make the mistake of just peeling back a little too soon. And this is especially for those that that are still in the government, still got 10 plus years, 5 plus years left. Stay the course. Those are the closer to retirement. Make sure you have your financial house built out. That's what we call it, but just make sure you have a strategy in place that allows you to stay the course, making sure your income is in a fixed place, making sure your money is outpacing inflation and not getting eaten up by the loss of buying power, and making sure you have a tax strategy. So just wanted to put that out there because moments like this, where, like I said, where people can be make you can it can make or break you, right? And so we keep these webinars coming every week. We keep new topics, keep it fresh. Last week we talked about Social Security. We'll talk about that again probably in the next month or two. And so we'll keep these fresh, making sure, and we also tailor these sometimes to the questions that you ask. We see some consistent questions asked. We'll tailor it. Risk has been a big thing for a lot of folks, so we always want to keep that there. So we'll see you all next week.